All right, today what we're going to look at will be simplifying rational expressions and multiplying and dividing. Did Brian, that work? Alright, so I'm not going to be quizzing you or testing you over the specific properties. You just have to know how to use them. So what this property is saying is that if you have a common factor of r, then you can cancel the r's out. So what we have on the bottom says, if you cancel a variable expression, you must write the disclaimer regarding the domain. Okay, so what that means is variables in the denominator can't be a value that would make the denominator 0. We can't divide by 0. Remember, that gives us undefined. That does not work. So like on a graph, if you have a denominator of 0, those values would be either a whole or an asymptote. You can't graph them. So we'll be talking about the disclaimers as we simplify these. Okay, so when we look at these problems, the first thing I want to do is I want to factor the numerator and denominator if possible. I have to note that with expressions in the numerator and denominator, they have these invisible parentheses around them. Okay, so what I cannot cancel, I can't cancel individual terms inside those parentheses. So I cannot do this. I cannot cancel those x's like that. You can cancel a whole factor, or when your things are pulled on the outside. Okay? So I go ahead and start off. Let's put those parentheses there. All right, on the top, is there anything I can factor? It's not a quadratic, and there's not a common factor, so nothing you can factor. What about on the bottom? Yeah, so it's not a quadratic, so it's not going to be factoring to two binomials, but it does have a common factor. And I'm going to take out a negative 7. All right, I'm going to, since that's a negative in front of the x, I'm going to factor out a negative 7. Okay, so I'm left with x, and then negative 7 times what gives me 28? Negative 4. Okay? All right. Now, I see what I can cancel. I can cancel this whole thing, x minus 4 and x minus 4. So I can't cancel individual terms, but I could cancel a whole factor. Okay, so now my numerator is empty, so that means what? What am I left with in the numerator? 1. I can't leave a numerator empty. I have to put a 1 there. And then on the bottom, I'm left with negative 7. Okay, so there's my answer. But remember, I just talked about a disclaimer. So here's my result, except for one thing. So x can be any number except something that would make the denominator 0. It's not 0. What would make this 0? 4. 4 minus 4 is 0, and that's what I cannot have. So I have to know that this is my simplified answer, except x cannot equal 4. So that's part of my answer there. Okay, let's look at 8b. So this is from section R5, page 51, where we did AA, 8b. Again, note the problem number, so when you go to do practice problems, you can find ones in the notes that are similar to those. Okay, I'm going to start off, and I'm going to go ahead and put the parentheses. Okay, on the numerator, I have a common factor of what? 3. So if I factor out a 3 from the numerator, I get x minus 6. Okay? In the denominator, I see that it's a quadratic, but I have a common factor I need to take out first. What do I need to factor out of the denominator? 6x. So once you do that, then it's no longer a quadratic. I have 2x. No, I'm sorry. I have x minus 2. X minus 2. Okay? Okay. So can I cancel my x minus 6 and my x minus 2? No, because they're not the exact same. I also can't cancel the x's on the inside. What I can cancel now are my 3 and my 6 that are both on the outside. So that 3 becomes 1, this 6 becomes 2. All right, so it's like reducing a fraction. 3 over 6 is 1 over 2. So I'm left with 1 times x minus 6, which is x minus 6, over what on the bottom? 2x minus 2. You can put the parentheses around the x minus 6, but remember those are understood. If it's just a single expression, you don't have to put the parentheses. Leave it in factored form. There's no need to distribute your 2x in the denominator. Leave it in factored form. Okay, let's talk about our disclaimers. So even though it didn't cancel, I'm still going to write what x can't equal. All right, so let's look at the denominator. From the beginning, I saw that it was x squared. That tells me that there's 2 values of x. So I'm going to have 2 disclaimers. Let's do this one first. This is usually the easier one. So what would make this 0? 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. Okay, what about this x? 0. So x can't equal 2 or 0. What about my x minus 6? That one doesn't matter because you can have 0 in the numerator. You can have 6. 0 divided by anything is 0. That 0 is a number. 0 is something you can graph. You cannot graph something that's undefined. Okay, questions about that? Okay. couple more of simplifying. Okay, is there a common factor to take out of the numerator? No, but it's a quadratic trinomial, so I still need to see if it factors. I'm going to check to see if it factors to two binomials. It does. So I know I'm going to have m and m. I multiply the negative 4, add to be 3. So I know I want to use 1 and 4. Since I multiply to be a negative number, I need one positive, one negative. I want to add to be a positive 3. So which one of these is going to be positive, the 1 or the 4? The 4. Good. Okay. In the denominator, is there a common factor? M. So then I get m minus 4. Okay? Any common factors to cancel? No. No. These are close, but they're not the exact same. So this one is done. My disclaimer, I'm going to use m because that's the variable we're working with. Okay, so 2 m's in the denominator, so 2 disclaimers. So m can't equal 0 or 4. Good. Okay, let's look at the next one. So the next one we have to do a little trick because this actually will simplify. It looks like it shouldn't simplify because they're not the exact same. But actually what they are, so let me rearrange the numerator. They're not the exact same, they're the exact opposite. So if your factors are the exact opposite, you can still cancel them. But they don't just completely cancel out, you're left with something. So I'm going to factor out a negative 1 in the numerator, which switches my signs. Now I can cancel. And I'm left with what as an answer? Negative 1. And I still note that x can't equal positive 3. Okay, so you could cancel factors that are the exact same, and those just cancel out completely. Or you could cancel factors that are the exact opposite, but then you're still left with a negative 1. Over here, there's m plus 4 and m minus 4. Those are still nothing that could cancel because they're not the exact opposite. The m's are both positive, and then the 4's are opposites. So they have to be exact opposite. So the m would have to be a negative m, and then 4 and negative 4. So still nothing to do with over here with the m plus 4 and minus 4. Those still won't cancel. Can we see the difference? Okay. Two more simplifying ones, and then we're going to look at multiplying and dividing. In the numerator, is there a common factor? No, but is there a way to factor that? Yes, that's called difference of squares. So difference of squares factors to two binomials. Remember, it's those conjugates. All right, so n plus 2, n minus 2. Now in the denominator, I don't have a common factor. I can't really factor that. The only thing I'm going to do is rearrange the order to put the n first. So I'm going to write that as negative n plus 2. So does negative n plus 2, is that an exact factor of either of these, n plus 2 and minus 2? No, but it is an exact opposite of one of them. So the this negative n plus 2 is going to cancel with one of these two in the numerator. Which one is it the exact opposite of? The n minus 2. So those cancel, but I'm left with a negative 1 still. It doesn't matter, actually. You can put the negative 1 on top or bottom. That doesn't matter. I just put it on top so then I could be done with my denominator. So you can leave the denominators empty if it's just 1 down there. Okay, so I have negative 1 times n plus 2. So you can leave that as your answer. Or if you want to go ahead and distribute and write it like this, that's fine as well. Okay, so I only had one n in the denominator. So n cannot equal, you can even look at it from up here if you want. N can't be 2. 2. Okay, look at 16a. All right, do we have a common factor to take out of the numerator? Yes, I should factor out a x. Okay. Do I have a common factor I should factor out of the denominator? X. Okay. I'll go ahead and cancel now these two x's. That's fine. I might want to go ahead and kind of start my disclaimer though, so I don't forget about it. So x can't equal, for this x, 0. Okay, so for that x, it can't be 0. Okay, but I see I have a quadratic still left in the top. This will factor more. Alright, so I multiply by negative 5, add to be positive 4. So I multiply by negative 5, so 1 positive, 1 negative. Add to be positive 4. Good, so plus 5 minus 1. Can I factor x squared minus 1 more? Yes, that's difference of squares. So x plus 1, x minus 1. Any factors that will cancel? Your x minus 1s. Alright, so for this, my disclaimer should be positive 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. Okay? So then my answer that I'm left with is x plus 5 over x plus 1. You can keep the parentheses around them, that's fine. But when it's just a single expression, you don't have to have the parentheses. And then I have one more disclaimer I need. X can't be negative 1. I don't care where you write this. If you want to write it up top, that's fine. If you want to write it by your answer, that's fine. But circle it along with your answer or put a box around it, something, so I can see it. So if we're talking about your quiz. Okay, so the disclaimer is not always a domain, meaning, so your domain, I would have to say, is all real numbers except these. So we're just saying, we're just doing the except part. That's the disclaimer. Okay, let's look at multiplying and dividing. So here's the property. Again, I'm not going to be testing you over this specific property. We just have to understand it. So when you multiply rational expressions or rational numbers even, so if you multiply fractions, you multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom, and note that our disclaimers here. When we divide, you multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So the second expression, you have to do the reciprocal, and then you multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. So that's why it's P times S over Q times R when we divide. The first thing we want to do with a multiplication or division or a simplifying is factor. So factor every numerator and denominator if possible. So in this top numerator, there's not a common factor, but it's a quadratic trinomial, so it's going to factor to two binomials. I want to multiply to be negative 24 and add to be 5. So negative 3 and positive 8. Yes. Okay. The denominator, same thing. I want to factor two binomials. Okay, this time I'm most likely to be a positive 9, so I either need two negatives or two positives. And I want to add to be a negative 6. So I'm looking at two negatives. So negative 3 and 3. Okay? Nothing I can cancel or factor with the b on top of the second one. How does b squared minus 64 factor? Difference of squares, so that's what? B plus 8, b minus 8. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is cancel out common factors. You can cancel any numerator with any denominator. So as long as one is in the top and one is in the bottom, they don't have to be the same fraction. So, for example, I could cancel out this b plus 8 and this b plus 8. Now, I can't do two denominators. Like, I can't do b minus 3 by b minus 3 here. But I could do this b minus 3 and this b minus 3. Or this one and this one. Okay, we'll go ahead and write our disclaimer before we write our final answer. So the last step then is to multiply. Okay, so b can't equal. So b can't equal. So I have to look at every factor. Okay, b can't equal 3. B can't equal 3. So I already have that written. B can't equal negative 8. B can't equal 8. Okay, now multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. What are you left with on top? B. And on bottom, b minus 3, b minus 8. Just leave it factored. You don't need to then FOIL. You don't need to multiply those back out. Questions about that? Okay, let's look at a couple division problems, and then that will be it. Okay, before we change this to a multiplication problem, go ahead and factor it out. Don't do any canceling, but go ahead and factor. So 5b minus 10, what do I factor out? 5. 7b minus 28, what do I factor out? 7. 2 minus b, can I factor anything? No, but let's switch the order. 5b minus 20, what do I factor out? 5. Okay, I want to go ahead and start my disclaimers because even though this 5b minus 4 is going to end up in the numerator, it was at one time in the denominator. So it matters with your domain. So at any point a variable is in the denominator, that's going to be an issue. So b can't equal, I'll start here, b can't equal 4, b can't equal 4. Okay. Alright, now change it to a multiplication problem. So your first fraction, the one on the left, stays the same. And then you do the reciprocal of the second line. What can I see that will cancel? D minus 4. Anything else? I could cancel the b minus 2 with the negative b plus 2, but I'm left with a negative 1. You can put it in the numerator or the denominator. That doesn't matter. Again, I usually just put it in the numerator. Before I multiply, I want to finish my disclaimer. So I already did this one. What about for this one? Negative b plus 2. 2. Okay, multiply across the top. 5 times negative 1 times 5. Negative 25. And on the bottom, 7 times 1 is 7. Okay, so in 22, I'm going to let you do this one. So start factoring. I'll jump in and start working it out too. I'm not going to work through the steps out loud because I want you to keep working. But periodically check and make sure your work's going to match mine. Note that you have difference of cubes here. So you have to factor using difference of cubes in this bottom right one. Hold up and make sure you're there. I'll let you get a chance to write it out. I'm not going to make you write a disclaimer for this quadratic. You'd have to use quadratic formula because it doesn't factor, and we're just not there yet. So just your linear factors, those are the ones that I want you to write the disclaimer on. Do all your canceling. Finish your disclaimer. Zero. And 4. Then your last step is to multiply. Well, I'm only left with this on top and my a squared on back. Okay. Any questions about any of the steps? Yeah.
You know, if it looks like squared.
No. Good question. It's attached because of this plus. Yes. Because of this a squared. So 0 would make this part 0. Okay.